Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, good morning, Kyle.
Morning, Kyle.
All right, folks. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Luz.
Awesome, great. All right, so we're gonna get started here in about 30 seconds or so, about 10:05, but we wanted to make sure that everybody kind of trickles in here. And we've got a few people coming into the waiting room right now as we speak. So let me go ahead and do that. Andy coming in. And Kat, that's for Alameda County, and we can give you some information on that as well. So it was specific to Alameda County in terms of that question for the mask mandate.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I had not heard that, so that means our staff needs to be wearing masks indoors again?
Yeah, you know what we're gonna do is, in fact, I'm gonna, I'm looking at the waiting list. Who just asked the question?
It was me, Brianna.
Brianna? Hi, Brianna.
Hi.
Brianna, can you do me a favor? Well, can you do me a favor and email Ashley in the chat? Give us your email. I'm going to send you the information.
You're on mute.
I'm gonna go tell my front desk. I'll be right back.
Sounds good.
All right, so it's about 10:05. Let's go ahead and get started. Austin?
Yep. Do you want to do the introductions or should I?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. So, hi everybody, happy Friday. So as you know that, we continue to offer these valuable webinars on behalf of the BBSI offices from Monterey, San Jose, and we hope that they've been helpful to you. Let me introduce Austin Smith, who is one of our risk managers, and he handles the Monterey office as well as clients out of San Jose. We have Joseph Lara, one of our risk managers, and of course my name is Rob Singh. I'm also one of the risk managers. Our other risk manager, Chris Carino, unfortunately cannot make it today, but one of the important things about every one of these meetings we always try to stress is know your risk manager, and why we have these meetings, because yes, we do have these meetings virtually and they're important, and you know what, they're efficient, we can get a lot of value add from it, but more important to us is that you use your risk managers. Every one of us, we're here for one purpose, and that's to support you. That's to support your loss control efforts. That's to make sure that we do everything we possibly can to make sure that the most valuable asset you have in your company, which is your employees, right, are loss-free, injury-free. That's why we're risk managers. We want to control risk. We want to help you with your health and safety prevention efforts. It's very, very important to us. And whether that's writing programs for you, whether it's doing trainings for you personally, whether it's going out and doing job site walks for you, ultimately, we want to make sure that you have a best-in-class health and safety management system in place to reduce injuries and to stay compliant. So again, that's why we always want, whenever we do a trainings, we have a lead instructor or co-instructors, and then we'll have all the risk managers in place so you know who your risk manager is. So today, one of the things before you leave today, make sure you understand who your risk manager is. So if it's Joe, if it's Austin, if it's Chris, or if it's myself, okay? And reach out to us. We are kind of mandated to ensure that we touch base with all of our clients at a minimum once a quarter. And sometimes we see our clients 2, 3, or 4 times a quarter because we're doing some incredible things with them. We're putting in active shooter programs for them, workplace violence programs for them. We're putting in, we're certifying their forklifts for them, forklift drivers. We're doing so much for them. but again, the whole goal is to assist you. So please take advantage of our services. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Austin lead the presentation, and hope you all have a good session. And please go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to respond to them as they move forward. So Austin, floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Austin Smith. I am the Risk and Safety Manager for here in Monterey. And today we're going to go over emergency action plans and fire prevention. So why do we need an emergency action plan? Well, unfortunately, one of the leading causes to or not leading causes, but approximately 145 fatalities happen per year, which is about 3%. A lot of it's due to fires and explosions. I think about 2 months back, we can go back to, there was a Taylor Farms fire that happened. So these things do happen, and we need to make sure that we prepare for them, or any other natural disasters. For instance, you might be on a fault, and so you might need to prepare for earthquakes. You might need to prepare for flooding. Other things you might need to prepare for, unfortunately, would be like active shooters and things of that nature. Unfortunately, that is something that is occurring more often than not. And so you just want to make sure that you're prepared. So in today's training, we're going to recognize the benefits of an emergency action plan. We're going to identify elements of a fire protection plan. We're going to go under, we're going to identify conditions in which an evacuation or shelter in place should be necessary. And then once we do that, we will then go into questions. So why do we have a emergency action plan? Well, the reason why we want to have that, again, is to make sure that we're all protected. And if you don't have a program in place, it is required by OSHA. And what you can do is reach out to either myself, Rob, Chris, or Joseph if you don't have these type of programs, because we do have templates. And we can make sure that we come out there to do what we want, which is the job site inspection to identify those potential risk factors. So first things first, we want to perform the site risk assessment. So that's conducting a facility walkthrough, looking for any potential risk factors such as fires. Maybe you have some kind of combustible materials within your facility. Maybe you're on the, like I said, an earthquake fault on the San Andreas fault. Maybe you have roofing issues. Maybe you're right next to a prison or located near a prison, and you need to add that into your EAP. So these are just some of the things that you need to be aware of. And then from there, document it with photos, maybe a video. But here it says every 6 months, but you can also do it maybe on an annual basis, whatever is more necessary, right? And so that's just something that we would suggest is every 6 months, just reevaluate your risk factors in regards to you know, your emergency action plan. Guys, anything else you want to add to that before I move on?
Yeah, no, I'll just add why we're doing this. And just to go back in time, a little history. There was a company called Triangle Shirtwaist Fire that killed 146 people in New York. Again, it happened in 1911, ironically, in 1911. And it was a 10-story building that they worked out of. They used the top 3 floors. They had 4 elevators that they used, but the only one was working at the time. And they were very small. You know, stairs were locked to prevent theft. So when you were up on the top floors, there was one door you could go into, but you can't come out. So if you took the stairs to get there, you walk in, you can't go back out. And the other one had chains around it. Shifts were 12 to 16 hours a day long, 6 to 7 days a week. So about low end 80 hours a week. The people were paid about $15 a week for their work. Most were young immigrant females, 600 workers total on those 3 floors. And 146 died because they couldn't get out. And of course, this is 1911 before the 1970 when the OSHA came into effect. But these are some of the reasons that they have us be prepared to prevent something like this from happening. Locking doors while in business, not a good idea. But we'll cover more of that as we go along.
Yeah, and real quick, Joe, on that one, just I can't believe, Joe, thank you so much for mentioning, because again, the site inspection, you by law, you're supposed to be doing inspections periodically. Okay, we recommend monthly. So the risk team and I, we can help you with these inspections, but one of the things we always talk about is what we call ingress egress block exit routes, or putting things, and there's been multiple situations where fatalities have occurred. You guys remember the whole situation with the club, right? Where about 200-300 people died because they couldn't get out, the exits were blocked. So these are all things that you have to make sure during your safety inspection you're looking for in the event there's an earthquake, fire, what have you, so that people can actually get out. So please make this a priority.
Yep, primary and secondary exits, making sure that people are avoiding like areas where there might be storage of combustible material, things of that nature. We'll get into that when we go through the floor plans and stuff like that, but those are just things that we want to consider. So again, the purpose of an EAP, emergency action plan. EAP is short. We as safety folks like to use acronyms for everything, unfortunately. But if you ever have any questions, just feel free to reach out to us about that. But again, the purpose of an EAP is to describe actions that must be taken to ensure employee safety. You want to, again, include those floor plans that we just talked about in terms of exit routes, making sure that in the event of a fire, there's postage stating that don't use the elevators, use the stairs. Tell employees what actions to take in the event of an emergency. And then we want to cover reasonable expected emergencies. So again, this goes into the site inspection, identifying the type of emergencies that your facility or job site might be, what's the word? I'm blanking on it, but making sure that you identify those hazards so that way your employees know what to do in the event of that. And this is all documented within the EAP, so that way it's properly trained upon. So again, the benefits of having an EAP, it is a written document that facilitates organizes employer and employee actions. Again, it is a OSHA requirement to have an EAP. So an emergency action plan is a written document required by OSHA. The regulations 29 CFR 1910.38. Again, the purpose of a EAP is to facilitate and organize an employer and employee action. The main thing is we want to reduce the chances of any loss of life and reduce the chances of the severity of injury, and making sure that everyone is being properly let out of the building if an evacuation is needed. And you can be cited under OSHA if for some reason you don't have enough employees trained or aware of an emergency action plan. And you should also check with your county mandates as well, because sometimes the county can come in and say, look, your alarm system isn't, you need an alarm system that is more proper than what you have, and things of that nature. So even though some things might not be required by OSHA, and some things that in regards to the emergency action plan, do check with county mandates as well. Guys, you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Perfect. So again, 5 important pieces to emergency action plan is your evacuation procedures. And it could be as simple as, okay, our primary, secondary exit. This is the floor map and the route that we're going to take. But it can become more complicated if you're in a bigger facility and you have multiple locations within that facility with groups of people. You want to make sure that escape routes are noted. You have your floor plan laid out at every entry. I believe it should be at the elevators and every entryway in terms of the floor map, identifying where you are in that exactly. How you're going to report the emergency, the accountability of staff and visitors. How are you going to account for when there is an emergency and you go outside? How are you going to do roll call? Where are you meeting? Things of that nature. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add in. I know some of you guys may be asking yourself, who must have one, or what are the requirements, and it reads, it's almost every business is required to have an emergency action plan or EAP if a fire extinguishers are required or provided in your workplace, and if anyone will be evacuating during a fire or an emergency, then you're required to have a emergency action plan.
And here what we have is a quick table of contents of a general emergency action plan. In terms of general information, tenant emergency coordinators, instructions, attachments. So this is just a brief table of contents, but like I said, reach out to your risk managers, either myself, Rob, Joseph, Chris, and we'll work with you to tailor your emergency action plan to your facility, so that way it better suits you.
So the other thing, just adding on to that, is once you do it, you have it established, you got it done. How often do I have to revisit it? And it says at least once a year.
Once a
So
year.
it has to be once a year. So every year you revisit, do a training, do a drill, whatever is required in your area, but it has to be revisited once a year.
So
Thanks,
going,
Joseph.
no worries. And so kind of just jumping back into the required elements within this plan. Again, you need to have a means of reporting. So evacuation procedures and emergency escape routes, the procedures and critical operations, how you're going to account for employees, rescue and medical duties. Again, if someone is having, you know, a medical emergency, who's there is going to be the assigned person that's first aid CPR certified, or who's going to notify the fire department, or who's going to, maybe you're in an area where you might not get cell service. How are you going to make contact outside of your facility? So these are just things that need to be added within this plan. And per OSHA, putting together a comprehensive emergency action plan that deals with those issues specific to your work site is not difficult. It involves taking what was learned from your workplace evaluation and describing how employees will respond to those different types of emergencies. Again, at a minimum, everything that's listed on the slide. And then OSHA, again, doesn't require you to have this, but a description of your alarm system is beneficial to be within your EAP. The site alternative communication center as well. So if for some reason you know your typical way of communicating with reaching out through using a cell phone, but now let's say the cell service is down, what's your alternative means of being able to communicate outside of your facility? And then also storage of important documents in terms of accounting records, legal documents. These are just some things that you should think about. A lot of times it's stored in the cloud, but if you don't have things being stored up in the cloud, then maybe try to think about storing it on an offsite location. And so that way, in an event of an emergency, you can still retain all your documents. Let's say if a fire happens. Okay. So training of your employees is an important and crucial part to an emergency action plan. So that's, again, when do you need to train your employees? When you first initially develop this plan, whenever your employee is assigned to a different job duty or job task. So let's say they're in one group and then they get assigned to be in a different section of the building. They should be retrained with that group of people on what their evacuation route is, who their lead is, things of that nature. And then if there's any changes to this plan, so companies go through turnover and maybe that person that you're typically you would handle a certain section of the EAP isn't there anymore, then that would be a reason why to make sure that everyone understands who the new person in charge is. Again, in terms of what you're training on, you're training on the type of emergencies, what their course of action is, what their functions are within this plan. If there's any kind of special hazards, maybe a different type of combustible material within your facility, and you want them to learn, maybe they need to fight the fire, maybe you're training your workers on how to do that. What type of fire hazards and prevention plans that you might have in place as well. Okay, so in terms of emergency action roles, again, going into the general training, the role, the responsibilities of each worker, they should know how to know that the threat that they might be dealing with through your hazard assessment. So if it's an earthquake, a fire, maybe it's a chemical spill, maybe you deal with chemicals and there's a chemical spill, protective actions to protecting themselves. A lot of times what ends up happening is employees try to save others before they focus on themselves, and you got to treat it like being on a plane. They need to be able to take care of themselves before they can take care of anybody else. So just kind of making sure that they understand that, how they're going to locate family members once they do evacuate and attendance has been taken care of, the use of emergency equipment. Maybe there's a spill kit that needs to happen. Maybe they need to know where, maybe there's special fire extinguishers, and then also the procedures for emergency response and things of that nature. Guys, do you have anything you want to add to it? Or are we good? Perfect. So going into the emergency action plans, we need to make sure that we have a method of reporting an emergency. So is it going to be through phone call? Is it going to be a method through an alarm system, pulling an alarm, someone yelling for help? Maybe you have a radio system that you're going to radio and communicate outwards. But these are things that you need to make that are detailed within this plan. So method of reporting an emergency would be like calling 911 or an on-site resource. Instructions for an exit is pull the alarm, use the nearest staircase, don't use an elevator, designate a rally point, and accountability. Who's going to take roll call and things of that nature. We want to make sure that you have a muster point. So where a location that everyone knows where they're going to meet up at in the event of an emergency in regards to an evacuation. And then instructions for limited mobility. So proceed to the nearest stairwell. For refuge, let's say if it's an active shooter, or go to this specific room with where there might be little to no windows and you can barricade yourself in. So
Yeah,
okay.
folks, and
Go ahead.
I'll answer this, and I know Austin's going to go into a little bit more detail on some of these things, but one of the biggest failures we've seen over the years, and my 27 years of doing this for corporations or what have you, or as a consultant, is when there is an emergency and the after effect is complete chaos. Austin talked about muster point. So what you want to make sure you do is, yes, you have muster points, or what we call evacuation assembly points, or what have you, things like that. But even if you decide to have an emergency response team, okay, you've got to do the drills. You've got to make sure that people are trained. It's not just enough to have an EAP, but at least once a year or twice a year, communicate what employees' responsibilities are. I've had situations where, we've had 300-400 people go to muster points and it's chaos. People are smoking, in their cars. I had one guy go to Taco Bell and bring back food during a drill. Now, thank God there are drills, right?
Yep.
Or, and we've had situations where it's massive, it's a huge situation and people are doing, we have to be able to count for people, not only indoors, but outdoors. And we need to make sure that, so when you're training them, you're talking about, look, you're staying in your circle, you're quiet, you're following instructions, you're doing this, you're not smoking, you're not leaving, the building, you're not leaving the premises. So it is critical that not only are you training these people in terms of the roles and responsibilities, but you're also doing drills so that you go through a dry run on these. And I think, Austin, you probably will be talking a little bit more about that too, right?
Yeah.
No, I'd like to add to that too, Rob. Thanks for bringing that up. Some of the plans that I've seen, you have a map of the layout of your building. It looks good. We're going to meet right here in this area. So this is our designated first meeting area, but they've never been out there. So then once we go and visit the area, there's electrical wires, there's this other hazards there, there's chemical storage area. That was the wrong area, but it looked good on the map. But once you physically went out there, so piggyback to what we're trying to tell you guys, and what Rob was saying is, make sure you do the walkthrough, and you're gonna have your mistakes will come out, but that's what it's for, to find out where your mistakes are, or where we're hesitant to do the proper thing, or whoever you assign maybe is not picking up on it correctly. Then train somebody else and always have that backup person. But that's so important to have those drills, so you'll find things out like, this is not the best area to meet.
So walkthrough, Joe, thank you so much. The walkthrough, I cannot stress enough, because again, you might find out that muster point is a bad area, or right, you're doing all this training, and now you have an emergency, and people have no idea where to go, or they're going unsafe routes and things like that. So again, the training, but you do at least twice a year, once a year, do a walkthrough, do a drill. And if you're a big enough company, have an emergency response team, because that emergency response team, you have a sweeper, you have assigned sweepers that are meant to go around and sweep the areas, make sure that they're looking in the restrooms, they're looking in cubicles. Some people might be in a silo, for God's sake, and you've got to make sure the entire building is swept. And then you have muster point coordinators that will actually go out to the muster points, wait for the people, direct them, keep crowd control, communicate with local authorities, and make sure that they're counting for people with a list of all these employees. But again, you need to go through this with the employees and have them actually walk through it, so that in the event when it's real time, everything runs smoothly.
Yep. And I know we're talking about physical drills too. Other aspects that you can do too is mental drills. So, if you have teams within a facility or within a construction site, having those teams meet up and running through, okay, what is your role and responsibility in regards to an emergency? What are the routes? And just doing the mental drills, you don't physically have to do the drill, but just thinking it through and maybe doing it as a tailgate topic could be beneficial for your team, just to make sure that they're aware of, like, oh, I didn't realize I'm supposed to exit this way, or I shouldn't be exiting this way because this is where we saw all of our chemicals and things of that nature. So
Yeah, and by the way, last point on that too, and I'm sorry, but I can't, we try to be later to belabor this, but it's so important. We have clients that we actually set this up for, one of our large clients, huge logistic company, we set up the ERT team for them. We train the ERT team for them twice a year, and we do the drills with them. We train the employee population with them. So again, this is where you can use us to actually set up your EAP, help you with the drills, help train the emergency response teams, help train them on the roles and responsibilities. So help us help you execute this plan.
Yep. And so when it comes to the floor plan, this is going to be pretty crucial in regards to your emergency action plan. The first thing that we want to do is designate a primary and secondary exit. So in this diagram, right, we got our primary and secondary exit for where people are going to leave. Your evacuation floor plan should be designated at least one primary exit and one secondary exit. And these exits must be remote from each other, and so arranged to minimize the possibility that both may be blocked. So if one's blocked, you can exit out the other. Okay. No emergency exits should be in restrooms. People shouldn't be trying to go, like what Rob was saying, when an emergency happens, people get, they freak out. They might run to a bathroom. They might try to go out the windows, things of that nature in the event of an emergency. But again, no emergency exit should be in the restrooms. It should be either out the main door, or maybe you have a back entrance that people can exit out of as well. Okay. You want to make sure exits are away from rooms with hazardous materials. So, if I'm over, let's say, in the middle of this area, I shouldn't have to pass by a storage room full of hazardous material to exit a building, because that could lead to, subsequently, if there's a fire and that explodes, or my exposure to those chemicals, or being, there's a lot of things that you want to avoid. And so usually when you're mapping out your floor plan, you want to make sure that employees are avoiding these rooms if possible. Okay. So next is no emergency exits in narrow passageways. This is a short passageway as shown in the diagram between the two buildings may not provide enough opening space for a safe evacuation, meaning people can, if there's not enough space, people can trip upon each other and be trampled. And so you want to make sure that narrow spaces are avoided. Okay. No exit signs indicating the nearest emergency exit. So exit signs there should be exit signs that are leading the employees out of the building, either through the primary, secondary, or whatever you've labeled as your exits. But you do want to make sure that they're properly lit, they're easily seen, so that way employees understand how to exit the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, doors that look like exits and not exits should be marked as not an exit.
Yep. And then assembly areas. So this is the muster point that we were talking about. This should be designated on the map. So if in correlation to your facility or your job site, people understand, okay, this is where I'm at. So if I'm over here where it says this, right where it says you are here on the bottom left, if I'm there, I need to get to the assembly area, and it should be able to guide you on how to get there safely. Okay. You should make sure that, again, there's signage by your elevators, if you do have them within your facility, that there should say no use of elevators in the event of an emergency. People should be using the stairways or following the proper procedures of getting out. Okay. And then indicated exits with wheelchair access. So if someone is, not able to, what is the terminology? I'm blanking on it. If someone's handicapped and they need to be able to exit the building safely without going downstairs, it should be properly noted on your floor map as well. Okay. Indicate the employee's current location as well. This should be everywhere. So this map shouldn't be just in one location. It should be all over the facility. So that way employees understand where they're located at. Yes, so, okay. And so that's essentially how you put together your map. And that's something that Joseph, Rob, myself, could assist you with if you don't have one for your current facility that you're in. So when it comes to emergency escape routes, they should be continuous and obstructed at path. So there shouldn't be anything stored in front of exit ways. This is something you should always be just kind of, when you're walking around your building, making sure your exits aren't being, people can exit through the exits. They should be clearly lit, marked in appropriate width, and obstructed, unobstructed. Okay.
And just to add a little bit on those signs as well, when I go around and do a facility check, there is a test button on the exit signs that you push on it, the lights go on. That means it's working. It
Yep.
should be checked once a month when you're checking your fire extinguishers to make
Yep.
sure they're good. I've run into a lot that are not working. You push the button, you hold it, and they're not working. So that means if it's dark, that's not going to be lit. People are not going to know the exit if the power goes out. So just FYI.
Yep. And when it comes to your exit routes and your exit ways, they need to be permanent exits. They can't just be something that's temporarily there. They have to be permanent. You must have fire resistant material, limited openings. It needs to make sure that it unlocks from the inside hinged. So like what Joseph mentioned about that, his incident that happened in 1911, a lot of the doors were chained shut from the inside so people couldn't leave the building. So again, when you have your exits, they need to be able to be open from the inside out. So if you're leaving the building, you can open it. Again, clearly communicate 3 elements of the escape route. So again, the exit access way, nearest exits, and pathways from the building structure. Okay. We don't want people taking unmarked paths where they can slip, trip, fall, or lead to additional hazards. Okay. So that's it for the EAP. The next thing we're going to touch base on is the fire prevention plan. Again, basic requirements: it must be in writing, kept in the workplace, and available for employees for review. If you don't have a fire prevention program, feel free to reach out to us again. We can provide you with this. Employers must inform their employees of fire hazards and review each employee that's applicable to this fire prevention program. So meaning if they're doing hot work, they need to be aware of this program. You should also have a hot work program as well. In the event that, you're doing hot work and you want to make sure that there isn't, and having a fire watch and permits and things of that nature filled out.
And then if you want to open for questions, Ms. Dominguez has a question.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Luz. She on?
Oh, yeah, this is
Okay.
perfect. I was typing
Okay.
it. So since here at the shop, we just have one main door and we have the garage door where all the trucks, it's their entrance. So it has to be just the principal door, or I have to put another sign in the garage door.
I would say it would be good to have a secondary exit, because in the event, let's say that the front door is blocked for whatever reason, how you're going to exit the building, right?
Yeah.
And
then I've
ahead.
seen her facility and she has a roll-up door on one side, then a man door next to it. That's what's supposed to be used. The
Okay.
roll-up door is not supposed to consider it as an exit. So
Okay.
your 2 exits are up in the front, and you do have a door in the back that's blocked with shelves.
Yeah.
That I would recommend that be made so that it's secured, but in a case of emergency, people can exit that side. But it's a small building. Your building's small,
Okay.
but still that exit, I would recommend to move the shelves over and then make that door functionable from the inside, because I know where you're worried about a lot is theft in that area.
Yeah.
And I would make it for just in case you have a big opening and you have the other door, which looks like you're fine. But
Okay.
in written, man doors is what counts. So you have one door up front, and the roll-up door doesn't count, and then the back door.
Okay.
In case of a
All
fire. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, your fire prevention plan. Well, before I jump into this, is there any more questions? I don't think so, but I think we're good. So at a minimum, your fire prevention plan must include a list of all your fire hazards, proper handling techniques for your material, and storage procedures for hazardous material, the potential ignition sources, and type of fire protection equipment. This is an OSHA standard, so you do need to make sure that this is at a minimum listed within your fire prevention program. It should also include procedures to control accumulation of flammable and combustible waste. It should also have procedures for regular maintenance and safeguards on any kind of heat producing equipment. So heat producing equipment would be considered, let's say if you have a furnace, or maybe you're using a grinder and it generates friction and it can generate heat, safeguards for that. It should also include the name of job titles of employees responsible for maintaining equipment. So that way they're properly maintained. And then who's responsible for the control of fuel sources. So maybe you're storing gasoline or some other flammable liquids within your facility. Then you should also have someone identified as the responsible employee. Okay, so fire prevention plan. So understanding fires is a crucial part and should be stated within this plan. But again, they need to understand that the 4 elements that are within, in terms of controlling a fire. So oxygen, the ignition source, the fuel, and the chemical reaction. So if you are to take away the oxygen, the fuel, or the heat, effectively you can't have a fire. And so this is something that should be identified within the plan. Joseph, you want to add anything to it?
Yes. So it's important to know where you work, because there are certain metals, depending if you have metal shops, that the ABC fire extinguisher will not extinguish,
Yep.
depending on your facility where you work. So I know if you've had the fire extinguisher service, they should have had a fire extinguisher that works for whatever you have inside your building. But that's important to know that I'm old enough to remember that there used to be an A extinguisher, a B extinguisher, and a C extinguisher. So the A was for paper, trash can fires, and the B was for liquids for fire, like gasoline and diesel, and you had to remember all these things. And the C was for electrical fires, so you had to pick the right fire extinguisher. Now, thank God, they put them all together. So all your extinguisher, if you look at it, has ABC. So they're in general, and it usually takes care of everything. But there is certain stuff that it doesn't do, and there's certain metals that the fire extinguisher will not extinguish.
And then that's why it's important to properly identify those materials within your fire prevention plan. So that way you can make sure you have the proper fire extinguishers and equipment to deal with if you are to have a fire relating to whatever you're handling within your facility. Okay. So again, part of the fire prevention plan is identifying your ignition sources: open flames, smoking, static electricity, hot work, hot surfaces, electrical and mechanical sparks, lighting. There is a separate program that should be tied in with this, which is your hot work program. So if you are doing hot work, which is anything that generates a spark, you should make sure that welding, cutting, brazing, these things should be noted within the hot work program and tied into the fire prevention plan. But the hot work program is to initiate to make sure that proper procedures are being followed for if anything is generating a spark. So that way you don't have a fire, because there's been a lot of instances where someone might be grinding, it's generating a spark, they finish their task, they walk away, but then there's a fire that happens about 30 minutes later because the spark goes behind a drywall and it ignites everything behind it. So again, tasks that require fire protection would be hot work, dispensing of flammable and combustible material, flammable waste, so solvent waste, oil rags, flammable liquids. You also want to make sure that you have proper storage of this stuff as well. So making sure that you have approved containers for how you're storing these liquids or materials, like soaked rags that might be soaked with whatever your whatever type of liquid you're using, be it gasoline or something else. You want to make sure you practice good housekeeping. You want to keep containers closed, store away from exits and passageways, and then you want to make sure that you keep them away from any kind of ignition sources. Rob and myself and Joseph can attest to how many times you'll be walking across a job site and someone's doing hot work right next to a bunch of cardboard or a bunch of flammable material, and then we have to stop. Hey, no, let's move it and maybe another 50 feet away from this so you don't, cause an immediate fire. But these are just things that need to be considered when putting together your fire prevention plan.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, the hot works, normally people that are welding, grinding, cutting metal, there's chips of little fire going, sparks going everywhere. That's what we're talking about, hot works. There's a permit that you have to put in place when you're doing hot works. Check
Yep.
the area, make sure everything's cleaned up and nothing's going to spark if a little spark does hit it from your cutting or welding.
Yep. And then you want to make sure you have a fire watch that
Mhm.
sits back for 30 minutes after the job is done. So that way they make sure that nothing's going to catch fire. If something is going to catch fire, they're there to happen. So the next thing that we want to touch base on is fire prevention, is the fire protection equipment. So having the right type of PPE and fire suppression. Again, this should be stated in your EAP if there's a fire. If you're going to have your employees fight or be trained to fight the fire, a lot of times employers won't train their employees. They'll just have them evacuate the building and then wait until the fire department comes because, if you don't properly train your employees, that can also lead to them being injured if you don't have the proper equipment or the fire extinguisher. And so this is something that you need to make sure that you identify within your emergency action plan and your fire prevention plan of like, we are going to train our workers in terms of fighting a fire, or if we're going to make the conscious decision to just have them evacuate the building. Okay. Rob, Joseph, you want to add anything to that? Rob, you're muted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Rob's muted. So the thing I'd add, and usually when I do some fire extinguisher training to the employees how to use it, to let them know that fire extinguisher is not going to last forever. It's going to go out pretty quick. And normally for emergencies, I have them trained to understand that fire extinguisher is to extinguish anything by the exit to get out and not stay there and fight. If they're not trained, don't stay there and fight the fire. If you don't know what you're doing, get out. That the fire extinguisher is there to help you save your life and those of those others around you.
Yep.
So yeah, that they don't last forever.
And some of the things to that point, to Joe's point, is that, it's okay to Joe's point, it's okay to train your folks, but you got to train them right.
Yep.
There's certain things that you have to do when you train them. Joe mentioned the exits, right? Like where your back, all right, is the exit is behind you, so that you can literally back away, things like that. But these are all things that is formal fire extinguisher training. And we always recommend, our recommendation is this: you train employees on how to fight a fire that's no larger than a small office waste can. So that's kind of rule of thumb. If there's a fire that's bigger than a waste can, a small office waste can, you're calling 911. Now, if they can go ahead and put out a fire that's small or even smaller, great. And you've taken care of it. And then make sure you take that same fire extinguisher and you get a charge. Don't put it back. The other thing is you need to make sure that your fire extinguisher, again, I know Austin talked about this, but you're doing your fire extinguisher checks, your annual inspections, as well as your monthly inspections. I have literally seen, I've seen this where somebody has tried to fight a fire and the fire extinguisher is not charged because somebody used it already and they put it back on the wall. How horrible is that?
Yeah.
From a life and property standpoint. So again, make sure your extinguishers are charged, annually serviced, but also at the same time, go ahead and feel free to train your employees. Another thing you can do, which is a great idea, again, if you're larger companies and you have an emergency response team, contact your local fire department and have them do a fun thing. I used to do this with big companies myself, with Tyco and ABM, where we'd actually go out there and we'd light fires in trash cans, and we have a fun drill and be part of our biannual emergency response drills, and we would have people actually put out fires. If you've never ever put out a fire, it's kind of nerve-wracking. But yeah, if you do this and you actually do it, with the fire department there and you're having fun with it, kind of a cool thing to do. And again, use us. We can actually help you coordinate this.
Yep. And so portable fire extinguisher training and education required for employees authorized to use fire extinguishers. General principles for fire extinguisher use. Again, this is just all part of, if you're going to have someone use a fire extinguisher, they need to be trained on how to use it. You need to understand the class. So this is what Joseph was talking about, the classes of fire extinguishers. There's 5 different classes. You got your ordinary combustibles, your flammable, liquids and gases. Class C is for energized, Class D is for combustible metals, and Class K is for cooking oils. Again, this should be detailed within your fire protection plan of the type of material that you're storing within your facility, and also the type of fire extinguisher that you need within that. Okay, and then they should be properly inspected. So on a monthly, so on a year, monthly and year to date. So your monthly can be done by anybody that you had trained properly on how to inspect a fire extinguisher. The yearly should usually be done by a fire marshal who comes out once a year to check and stamp it to make sure that it's good to go. But the monthly is just a visual inspection. You're just checking the gauge, make sure that it's in the green. You're going to make sure that the pin's not pulled, and that, you know, everything's good to go with it. There's no dents with it. And so, and then you want to make sure that you teach them pass, which is pull, aim, and then sweep side to side with the fire extinguisher. It's a simple method of teaching employees on how to do that. So, and that concludes our presentation for today. We'll open up for questions, and yeah, happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah. Any questions? And I know Kyle had one. I answered the first one, Kyle. The second one was on soldering. That one's not looked at as welding and cutting, but I would make sure they have a fire extinguisher close by. Maybe an extra one, just have it close by just in case something happens. But welding, if they're doing any, it's usually in small jobs, usually when something happens.
Yeah. And I think per OSHA's definition, hot work is considered anything that produces like a spark or a flame.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you.
Well, appreciate
Well,
everyone
what I'm gonna do
attending.
real quick is
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead, and I know that I want to wait for the end of the meeting, but here's a link. I'm sending everybody a link right now to the Alameda County mandate, and pretty much just like you said, it's indoor masking requirements, just like we had in Santa Clara County not too long ago, where businesses and things like that. I'm also going to send everybody here in the chat in the chat a document that is the actual ordinance. Just so everybody has it. But does anybody, as I'm doing that, does anybody else have any questions about the presentation?
I guess I do, because in my situation is just a little bit different in that we have an office and we don't have like on the job training, and we have 104 independent contractors and only 3 employees. So like we're way off. So, and we don't know when our independent contractors are in the building. They come and go as they please. So with this requirement, is it just important that we just train the actual employees?
You're talking about a job site, right? Not your facility itself. You have your office, but these are independent contractors at a job site.
No, these are independent contractors in the office.
Oh, yeah. I would say I would train anybody that's on the evacuation, on the everything that we covered.
Okay.
If they're there at your building, I would make sure that they're trained.
Okay.
It's for liability reasons.
Okay.
Austin and Joe, can you both type in your email and your cell phone numbers?
Yep.
Sure.
Chat real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, if any of you have Chris, the way to know who your risk manager is, folks, is contact your business partner. So whether that is Gary Puckett, it's Bob Min, Brian Bodie, or Sharif Tadros, right? So we all basically support those 4 business units. And if you don't know who your risk manager is, reach out to your business partner, and the business partner will go ahead and let you know which one of us supports you. Okay. And I know for like Joe and some of us, like, you know, of course, like for Monterey, it's primarily Austin. For business unit 3, which is Brian Bodie's business unit, is primarily Joe. For like Bob Min, is primarily Chris Carino, you know, and things like that. So, and then, you know, between the 4 of us, we kind of split up Gary's business unit to help him out. But that's how you would know who your business unit is. And again, you're seeing all 3 of our contact information if you have any questions. Just a couple of reminders before we start off here. And Austin, Joe, great job, by the way, on the presentation. We'll get this presentation out to you. We actually realized that we're going to get some other presentations out to everybody as well. You know, that unfortunately didn't get to you all from the last couple of presentations. So we'll make sure that those go out to everybody as well. But a couple of things, again, I sound like a broken record, but let's make sure that we are doing your biannual injury management training for you, right, at your location. If you haven't had that done yet, please contact the risk manager that supports you, and let's do your biannual injury management training, so that we know exactly how to deal with injuries, how to report injuries, how to deal with workers' comp, how to deal with any OSHA. The other things, again, we want to make sure that you are contacting your risk manager, whether it's Joseph, Austin, Chris, or myself, about every single injury that you have, so that we can guide you through the process. And then, and we're also going to be sending out these 1-pagers that we created. I'm not sure if you already got them, but there's these 1-pagers that is a supplement to the red folders. You have the injury paperwork that basically says, hey, look, you know what, your first aid, this is what you do. You have a medical injury, you have this is what you do. The last thing on my announcement today is that, you know, again, our thoughts and prayers are for a lot of those who've been lost in the recent gun violence situations, you know, in Texas and New York and all those other places. So workplace violence is a big deal. Workplace violence prevention program is a big deal. We can actually help you with that. So our next presentation, which will be on the 17th of June, we have it initially for, I believe it was a safety inspection process, but we're going to change that to be workplace violence.
I'll meet you in the conference room. I'll be just finishing up this meeting.
So we're going to change the topic to include workplace violence and active shooter. We'll get that information out, but this is also something that we can help you with. Not only create a plan for you, but if you need some training, we can do that individual training for you as well. Okay. So reach out to your individual risk manager if that's something you want to do, but look out for that training on 6/17 coming up.
And
Awesome,
on my
Joe.
part, thank you
ahead.
guys all. Thank you guys all for taking this time to be with us and just learning as we go along. And it's all about taking care of ourselves and our employees, and that's what we're here for.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Take it easy, everyone. Have a good one.